now watching Way Back Wednesday, sponsored by Davenport Auto Park, the ride of your life. And also sponsored by Flores Glass, serving the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
And welcome to another episode of Way Back Wednesday. I'm Randy Adcock. So glad you could join us tonight. Got what I think is an interesting show tonight. You know, for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the Children's Museum and dinosaur bones and Maywood Bell. And first of all, I want to send out a thank you. I don't know who the caller was, but after last week's show, and I'm not sure whether it was last week after Wednesday night's show or after one of the replays, this weekend, Saturday or Sunday. But we had a caller that called in and answered a question I had put out last week, wondering where Maywood's Bell was now, where she was living. And so someone called in to the station and left a message for me telling me where she was at. And so I went to see her. I had not seen May in a couple of years. I didn't realize it had been that long. But actually, when we got to talking, it had been in 2020 since I last saw her. And so she's had a couple of birthdays since I last saw her. She's 104 years old now. And just remarkable lady. I didn't stay long. As you might imagine, she's very frail. She did not expect any visitors, obviously. And so I had a tinge of guilt when I got to her room. She was actually sleeping, and I woke her up. But, you know, she had a book laying on her chest. I didn't catch the title of the book. But one of the things that I remembered about her, she's always has been an avid reader, and she was reading this book, I guess, and fell asleep sitting in the chair there in her room. But in any case, we had a short visit, but it was a very nice visit nonetheless. And, you know, on the way there, I had a myriad of questions, just a multitude of different things I wanted to ask her. I wanted to get more history on her and her family and so forth. And unfortunately, once I got there, I just couldn't bring myself to ask her a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask her because it was obvious she was struggling to talk, and I didn't want to stress her out. But, you know, I have to tell you, when I left there, I had mixed feelings. May, and I told one of the girls at the front desk, I said, you know, this lady's an institution in Rocky Mount. Her life it reads like a mystery novel in some ways, but certainly it's been a fascinating existence. But during the time that I was there, she made the comment that she had been there for a while, now over a year. I think she went sometime last year. But anyway, she made the comment that all her friends and all her associates, had passed on. And I asked her, I said, have you got any family here in the States at all? She says, no family. So she literally has no one, no family, no friends. Very few, if any, visitors other than the nursing home staff that comes in to check on her. And I made the comment to her, I said, well, it's a blessing that you've been around this long. And she said, I don't know if it is or not. She said, she said, I kind of wish sometimes I had gone on with all my other friends and so forth when they passed on. And so, like I said, it was kind of sad to hear her make a comment like that, but I think I understand where she's coming from. At her age, the likelihood of making any new friends, long-lasting friends especially, is slim to none, obviously. And so I guess she feels like she really literally is sitting there waiting to die. And I hate to put it in that phrase, in that context, but that's kind of the impression that she gave me, is that she has done all the living that she needs to do or wants to do, and she's really just ready. For lack of a better term, she's ready. But I did get a picture of her. And for a lady who's 104 years old, I have to tell you, and feel free to zoom in there. She is just, her mind is still sharp. She can carry on a conversation, but as I said, she gets tired very quickly. And when I asked her, could I take a picture? I had my son, by the way. I took my son Daniel with me, and I told him before we left home, I said, this may be your only chance to ever meet and talk to someone who's 104 years old. I said, if you don't want to go, that's fine. I said, but you may. And he said, yeah, I want to go. So I took my son Daniel with me, and when I asked her, could I take a picture, she was leaning back in a chair initially. And she said, sure. And she actually herself leaned forward in the chair and looked directly into the phone, my smartphone that Daniel was holding. And as you can see, she's still got a head of hair. I mean, I hadn't seen her like in a couple of years, but she looks very much today as I remember her from 2 years ago. But she's absolutely a charming lady, and it's just a shame that all her friends and family have long since passed on. And I've done a little more research on May. You can just leave that there for a minute. I'm going to just read a little bit about some things that I found out about Lee. We mentioned a couple of these things last week, but I did a little more research. Her birthday was July the 9th of 1918. Can you imagine how many birthdays and how many anniversaries or how many special events that she has witnessed, how many political eras and elections, and it's just mind-blowing how much she's been able to take in her lifespan and how much things have changed from the time she was a young girl to her age now. She was actually born in England, and I thought perhaps her parents may have been traveling overseas and she was born there, but she said, no, my parents were English. So her parents didn't go to England and then she was born there because her parents were traveling there. Her parents are from England. But she was born July 9, 1918 in England. As a small child, her family moved from England to Canada. And she lived there for a period of time before eventually moving to the U.S. And I asked her, did she remember exactly, and she couldn't remember when she moved to Canada or when she moved from Canada to the U.S. She said, I was a very small child then. But we talked a little bit about her husband, and I was having a discussion with an individual early this week, and he said, well, I never knew there was a Mr. Bell. I said, well, there was. His name was Albert David Bell, and I've been looking. I have not been able to find a marriage date yet. My best guess is sometime in the late 1930s, could have been early 40s, but as of September of 1942, they were living as husband and wife in Hutchinson, Kansas. And in fact, an article in the Hutchinson, Kansas local newspaper in August of 1942 states that A.D. Bell used to live in Chester, Pennsylvania. So I couldn't find any evidence that they lived there together. I think perhaps he may have been from their area originally himself, but I couldn't find any evidence that he and May lived together in Pennsylvania. Another article appeared in the Hutchinson News stated that A.D. Bell came to Hutchinson from DeLandis University in Santa Ana, California, where he had been an instructor. During the time he was an instructor at this DeLandis University, he and May were living in San Diego, California. So later in 1943, he was a pastor, by the way. Albert was a pastor in the Universalist Church. And I did a little bit of research on a Universalist church. It's kind of I guess for lack of a better term, we'll say an offshoot of the Catholic Church. But he was a pastor, and he eventually got his doctorate in religion, and so he was referred to as Dr. Bell. But in May of 1943, he was the pastor of the Universalist Church in Hutchinson, Kansas. In December of 1944, they were listed as living at 17 North Poplar Street in Hutchinson. An article appearing in the December 3rd, 1944 Hutchinson News stated May Bell was due to return from a trip to Beverly Hills, California, where she had been visiting relatives. Now, I don't know who these relatives were. They never had any kids, by the way. Her and her husband never had any children together, and she never remarried. So I don't know if these were relatives of hers that had come from England. Oh, we got a call. Let's get this call. Hello, caller. You on the air?
Well, good evening, and I have just tuned in, and if I don't recognize her picture, of course, but listening to you talk, I have just put the pieces together. Is that May Woods Bell from the Children's Museum?
That is indeed. Yes, ma'am. That's May Woods Bell.
Oh, my gosh.
And she's 104 years old.
I just can't believe it. I was born and raised one block from where her church, the Universalist Church, across from R.M. Wilson Junior High School, right there on the corner.
Yes, ma'am.
On Raleigh Street and Marigold Street.
Right. They lived over there for a while. They sure did.
I used to walk one block to go with her to the museum on Sundays.
Well, I'm sorry you missed the first part of the show, but I went to see her this past Sunday. I found out where she was, and I went to see her. We had a short visit, but it was a very nice visit. She's very frail, obviously, and she tires out very easily. And so I didn't want to stress her out too much and try to ask her to speak too much. But she was an absolute joy. She apologized to me, in fact, for not being very sociable. And I said, look, no apology necessary. You didn't expect me to show up today, and I came uninvited, so no apology necessary. But she is still an absolute charming lady.
Oh, she was amazing. She was so good at the museum. People just loved her. And I knew her husband. He preached at the church, and they lived in that same building. And even my son, when he became of age, I would drop off there at the museum on my way to work, and he would help her with the alligators and snakes. He just loved animals. And she was wonderful with the kids.
She was indeed. She always loved.
She lived on Beale Street.
That's right. That's right.
There was an article for the newspaper every week, I believe.
She did. She was actually on the staff at one time. She was a paid writer for the Rocky Mount Telegram. She sure was.
She and I have a history. I would love to drop by and see her.
Well, I tell you what, I'm sure she would love to see you, and she can take visitors. She can have visitors. She's living in Arbor Springs Retirement Home now, which is kind of catacombs across from Inglewood Baptist Church on Winston Avenue.
Yes, I'm very familiar. I have had family members there.
Well, that's where she is. You know, as I said at the top of the show, she's kind of in a sad situation. All her family members, of course, have all long since passed away. All her old friends, most of them anyway, have passed away. And I hate to say this, but I kind of got the impression she's ready to pass away herself. She's ready to pass on to the next world. And so I'm sure she would love to see you.
I begin to understand that more and more. Believe me, I know I'm of a certain age myself now, a senior, and you do. You just have a lot of memories, but you wonder about what tomorrow will bring. So
yes, ma'am.
I will stop by and see her. I'm just glad I tuned in tonight.
Well, I am too. And when you speak to her, tell her you saw the show, and tell her we were talking about her, and tell her Randy said hey.
She was a mentor to a lot of people.
She was that. Yes, ma'am, she sure was.
Okay,
well,
thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for calling in. Bye-bye. Okay. Yeah, mentor is just one of the many words that's been used over the years to describe Mae Woods Bell. She had a gift, I guess the best way to say it. She had a gift for particularly dealing with kids. She loved teaching kids and telling kids about science and the arts. She was very active in the Cub Scouts. She taught den mothers how to be a den mother. She was actually very active in her church, as the caller just implied. Her husband being a pastor, she was very active in the church. And so, before the caller, I was just reading a few things that I had been able to determine, doing a little bit of research. Her husband, Albert, in May of 1946, became the mayor of Hutchinson, Kansas. That's where they were living at the time. And so by 1952, of course, they were living in Rocky Mount. In fact, in 1951, Mae went to work for the Rocky Mount Children's Museum. And I believe it was during that same year that they actually moved here. I've not been able to find anything referencing either he or his wife, either one of them, prior to 1951. But in 1951, Mae was chosen to be the director of the Rocky Mount Children's Museum. And so I believe they came here during that year. Oddly enough, by 1961, Albert had taken a job pastoring a church in Southern Pines, and he left Rocky Mount. And by 1962 and 63, the Rocky Mount City Directories were showing Mae as living basically by herself, I guess you'd say, at the home on Beale Street. And I wanted so much to ask her. I had all these questions that I wanted to ask her about her husband and about her marriage, and frankly, how do you approach something like that? I was curious, obviously, how the marriage came to end. Did they have a fight? Did they drift apart as some married couples do? But I just couldn't bring myself to ask those questions, and so it's probably something just better left unknown. But regardless of what happened, they did part ways in 1961, and she never remarried. and she kept herself busy with her with the museum. Many remember her from the library, from the public library. She was quite often asked to speak at all kinds of events around Rocky Mount. She was very involved in things like garden clubs and arts and crafts, and so people would invite her to any kind of event they were having if they wanted an expert, if you will, on how to decorate or how to, she was just very active in the community in a lot of different ways, and certainly very active with the kids. Some years back, and I'm not exactly sure the exact time frame this happened, but May, and deservedly so I should add, was inducted into the Rocky Mount Twin County Hall of Fame. And there's a nice write-up there in the Twin County Hall of Fame. I've actually pulled this up before I came on the air tonight, and there's a little bit of history here, and this is directly from the Twin County Hall of Fame webpage. It says, May Woods Bell was born in England, but has spent the past 60 years in Rocky Mount. She came here in 1951 and began the Children's Museum, which grew from a few exhibits to a major community program. She began in the library with a small collection, much of her own, that expanded to the museum in Sunset Park. As founder, May served as museum director for over 30 years, often visiting community organizations to raise funds and support for the museum. One Kiwanis Club member once commented, May is the most expensive free speaker we've ever had. Her lifetime dedication to the Rocky Mount Children's Museum earned her the Southeastern Museum's Distinguished Service Award in 1978. May has been active with the East Carolina Council of the Boy Scouts of America. She served as the vice president of the Cub Scout program. She helped train den mothers and earned the Compass Award, the highest honor given to non-scouts. She was also honored with the Silver Fawn Medal for distinguished service to the Boy Scouts of America. May, and of course at this time, let's just go on this finish reading. She was also honored with the Silver Fawn. She was also an accomplished writer for both prose and poetry. Her poetry book entitled Rhymes won the Sam Reagan Award for Poetry. She has written book reviews and articles for the Rocky Mount Telegram for many years. Her works also have been published in the Wall Street Journal. She was recognized by the North Carolina Press Club as Communicator of the Year in 1989. May is a founding member of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Rocky Mount and teaches Sunday school. This was some years back when this article was written, obviously, and she's now in a nursing home. She's also a founding member of the Tar River Archaeological Society, active in numerous community organizations. May is a member of the Friends of the Brownsville Library, the Rocky Mount Luncheon Pilot Club, the American Red Cross, the North Carolina Press Club, and the North Carolina Archaeological Society. Bell received the Daughters of the American Revolution National Americanism Medal, a National Award for Service, Leadership, and Patriotism in 1987. She was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2010, by the way. I didn't neglect to say that earlier. In 2010 was when she was inducted. So we're going to talk a little bit more. I just realized we slipped past our first break, so we're going to take our first break here. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Albert Bell. I didn't find an awful lot about him, but since he was married to Mel for some period of time, a better part of 20 years, best I can tell, I thought it'd be nice to kind of at least take a look at that man, learn a little bit about him. So take it away, Lee. We'll be right back, folks, with more Way Back Wednesday.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service, we offer refreshments prior to visitation and services of our family, and we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal. providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
And we're back. We're talking about May Woods Bell tonight. And by the way, the caller earlier gave us some very good memories of her time with May Bell in years past. I'd like to encourage anyone who has a fond memory or a story about May, feel free to give us a call. The number's on your screen, 407-1111. As I said, May led a fascinating life, and is still with us. I'm quick to point that out too. 104 years old, she's still here, and as I said earlier, it's a little. I'm a little saddened by the fact that she feels like she doesn't have much reason to live now, and is almost like she's waiting for her time to come. I understand. I do. Everyone that she used to pal around with and associate with and travel with. Another thing about May, her and her husband together traveled extensively, but after they separated and went their separate ways, she continued to travel. And, she, as I said earlier, she would get called on to go speak at different events and different social groups and clubs and so forth. And so she was on the go quite a bit. In spite of everything else she had going on here in Rocky Mount, she still found time to do other things as well. I mentioned that I had a little bit of information on her husband, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I just thought it was interesting that she was married and they, parted ways. I don't know what happened between them, and I guess at this point it's irrelevant. But when I was actually looking, what got me interested so much in him was when I was trying to find when they got married. Because I wasn't sure. They didn't get married here, obviously, and I found evidence that they had been married as early as 1941, 43, along there. And so my best guess is they got married wherever they were living prior to moving to Hutchinson, Kansas. But while I was going back trying to find a marriage date or something, and part of that, digging in that direction, was trying to find her parents' name. I was curious to see who May Wood's parents were in England. I think that'd be a fascinating journey to explore there, is her ancestry in England. I did a quick search today. Her birthday on the newspapers.com website, July 9th, 1918. And in England, it came back with thousands of different references. The search mechanism in that newspapers.com website is not very precise, frankly. Sometimes just the manner in which you search can mean all the difference in the world, whether you find anything or whether you find 10,000 responses. And so when you find 10,000 responses, it's impossible to go through and find what you're looking for, obviously. But anyway, I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about him, and then we're going to jump into, I mentioned earlier that May was inducted into the Twin County Hall of Fame back in 2010. And we've discussed that, the people who put that together are quick to point out that it is a Twin County Hall of Fame and museum. They don't have a space per se, a building, if you will. They're headquartered, of course, in the new Rocky Mount Event Center over off Main Street over here. But they've done some really good work, and I tip my hat to those. Every year they nominate several people, and so we're going to look at the nominees from last year, from 2021. Many of these folks I knew, some I never did know, some I still know for that matter. But anyway, we'll get into that briefly, but as I said earlier, Albert Bell was a pastor. He was a Universalist pastor. And the things that I have read about him and from what I've heard, he must have been very strict in his religion. He actually ruffled a few feathers. I found a couple of articles where he ruffled a few feathers. And I think probably being a very stoic religious person can sometimes rub people the wrong way. It probably was not intentional. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that. But in any case, he was a very educated man himself, as was May, but he was very educated, and he was very devout to his religion. And I think he traveled the world, I mean, before they were married and after too, from what I've been able to gather. And spent a lot of time researching the roots of this Universalist church and how it related to other types of religions and so forth. But I found this article in the Hutchinson newspaper from February 1943. Lee, put up item number 1 if you would. We're just going to blow through these few things here, just a little bit about Albert Bell. He had an article in the paper every week, and it's kind of hard to see on your screen, I understand. But you see the headline, Freedom of Choice is Vital. And he goes on, this is a little sermon he gives here, Sunday school lessons refers to it. All intelligent processes are governed by eternal principles. All reasonable processes have a chronological sequence, a cause, a medium, and an effect. True religion is based on the ability to reason and the freedom to choose. For the aim of religion is toward a perfection that is unattainable without experiences resulting from choice. So again, he's a bit stern in his beliefs here. I can see where some folks would perhaps get rubbed the wrong way and be a little put off by someone who is so strictly and devoutly religious in their beliefs. Let's go on and lead to item number 2. And we're going to bounce back and forth here a bit. I know you can't see it on your screen, but the only reason I put this up here is because this was from February 1943 also. And while her husband was very religious and very devout in his efforts with his pastoral duties, May was very active in the war effort. 1943, the war was raging all across the world, and so there was a drive in Hutchinson, Kansas, and you see the headline, Save Nylon, Tin, and Fats. And so there were several little committees and groups there in Hutchinson, and May headed up one of them, and the whole point, of course, was to get anything that could be used in the war effort. And, you know, we talked about in prior shows how they were, asking people to, old tires, for example, turn in old tires, or anything could be repurposed. Certainly scrap metal that could be repurposed into guns and tanks and airplanes and ammunition and so forth. And May was very active in this drive for the war effort. And so this was in February of 1943. Another interesting thing that I found out about May while talking with her, she had one brother, no sisters that she mentioned, but she did mention her brother who actually got killed in World War II. She didn't say where or exactly when that happened, but she had a brother to die in World War II. Let's go ahead and lead to item number 3. And this I found to be somewhat interesting. In addition to his great interest in religion, in particular the Universalist Church, he was actually very interested in genealogy. And this article appeared in August 1947, and it says the Reverend Albert D. Bell, mayor of Hutchinson, Kansas, and by this time, by the way, he was a mayor, and pastor, of course, of the Universalist Church, is spending a month in the East tracing his ancestry. The minister combines religion, civic duties, and interest in his lineage. He has visited every county seat on the eastern shore and has found the oldest records at Accomack, Virginia. In the old cemetery on Franklin Street, Denton, the minister found the grave of his great-grandfather, the Reverend John Bell, pastor of the Methodist Church here, who died in 1859. He's also interested in the Hollis, Anthony, and Edgell families of Caroline County. He is visiting at the home of a relative, Mrs. Louise Farrell, in Milford, Delaware. So I saw several references to Albert Bell teaching in various colleges and classes of different types, and he always seemed to be tying everything to his religious beliefs. And again, that he was a pastor, so I guess you'd expect that to an extent, but it obviously rubbed some folks the wrong way. Item number 4, if you would, Lee. In October of 1947, this article appeared in the Clinton, Illinois newspaper, and you see the headline, WCTU Raps Ex-Mayor of Kansas Town. And I read a little bit about this, but it says the Reverend Albert D. Bell, who was once mayor of Hutchinson in the dry state of Kansas, was attacked by the Women's Christian Temperance Union today because he opposed prohibition. And you might think that's kind of odd that a mayor would oppose prohibition. But it says the local WCTU chapter with 69 members protested the selection of Dr. Bell to deliver the sermon at Clinton's annual joint Thanksgiving services. Ministerial Association cited Bell's alleged remarks against prohibition. Bell, who was formerly a state superintendent of churches in Kansas and has been pastor of St. Paul's Universalist Church here since July, denied that he had mentioned prohibition in his sermons. He said the whole thing got started when he refused an invitation to a WCTU meeting because I didn't want to be a hypocrite. He said, I just don't believe in taking anyone by the scruff of the neck and telling him he has to do so-and-so, the minister said. So anyway, long story short, apparently at some point, the pastor had a position that was contrary to these women, and he had been invited to preach a sermon, and they said, no, we don't want him. We don't want him preaching our sermon because he don't think like we do. So anyway, item number 5, Lee, if you would. This appeared March of 1951, and again, it says, historian to preach here Sunday morning. Dr. Albert Bell, Universalist minister from North Weymouth, Massachusetts, will be the guest minister at the 11 o'clock worship service Sunday morning at the First Union Methodist Universalist Church. And I think I just solved one of my own missions. I had read this a couple times and did not catch that apparently before they came to Rocky Mount, they must have been in North Weymouth, Massachusetts. So there's another avenue to pursue right there. Anyway, Dr. Bell was mayor of Hutchinson of Kansas from 45 to 47 and served as coordinator of the Office of Civilian Defense there during World War II. He is listed in the World Who's Who and is a well-known historian and genealogist. He is now working on a series of volumes dealing with the western migration of the Quakers from Northeast through North Carolina. So, again, he was very active, very in tune with genealogy and how it tied into religion. And, I've done a little bit of genealogy research myself, and a lot of times churches are a good source of information when you're doing genealogy research. Old Bibles, for example, a lot of old church records and directories and so forth can be very helpful in tracing genealogy and lineage. So it makes sense that he would tie the two together. Okay, Lee, let's go to item number 6 if we could then. Excuse me. This was an article I found, and it's dated December 1951. And it says, Lions hear of museum plans. J.W.E. Joyner, president of the Rocky Mount Children's Museum, was the guest speaker Thursday night at a meeting of the Rocky Mount Lions Club. He spoke on the subject, what a children's museum really is. The first museum of its kind organized, Joyner said, was in Brooklyn, New York in 1899. He goes on to say the proposed museum in Rocky Mount will be patterned after the earlier ones. And says Ms. Albert D. Bell has been chosen as director of the museum. She has had long experience in museum work. A lot of folks don't realize, too, the museum started in the basement of the Thomas Hackney Brazel Memorial Library here in Rocky Mount. That's where the museum started. It eventually moved from there to another location down on Church Street, kind of catty-corners across from City Hall now. It was not there very long, however, before it eventually moved into the building over at Sunset Park. So it's been in 3 different locations, or had been in 3 different locations during the time it was in operation. Okay, Lee, let's go then to item number 7, and this is probably the best picture that I was able to find of Albert Bell himself. And this is in September 1958, and you see there it says, Dr. Bell takes post with the sunshine chain. I found this interesting because he was a pastor, number one. He had been a prior mayor in Hutchinson, Kansas, some 10 years earlier. He was obviously very involved with genealogy and historical work and so forth. But this article appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram, 1958. It says, William D. Bennett, prominent operator of several local laundry and dry cleaning establishments, last night announced the appointment of Dr. Albert D. Bell to the general managership of the Sunshine Laundry chain. Until his retirement from the ministry several weeks ago, Dr. Bell has been pastor of the Rocky Mount Church since 1951. In the announcement to the employees and patrons of Sunshine Laundry, Bennett said, "Dr. Bell's appointment gives a very personal feeling of gratification, for I believe that through his work I shall see the fulfillment of a dream that I shared with my late brother, J.R. Bennett Jr., founder." So in 1961, it looks like Albert Bell retired from the ministry. Doesn't say what he did for the next 6 or 7 years, but in 1958 he took a position with the Sunshine Laundry as kind of a general manager. So quite a jump from his previous roles. And lastly, relating to Dr. Bell, item number 8, if you would, Lee. This article appeared in August of 1961, and it says, "Dr. Albert D. Bell, former Rocky Mount minister, has accepted a call to become pastor of Our Savior Lutheran Church at Southern Pines. Dr. Bell has been living in Columbia and engaged in writing a book since leaving Rocky Mount. Will succeed the Reverend Jack Deal at Southern Pines." So in 1961, Albert Bell left this area. Actually, it says here he had been living in Columbia, so I'm not sure if this is Columbia, South America, or somewhere in the States named Columbia. It doesn't specify there. Very well could become Columbia, South America, for all we know. But apparently he left Rocky Mount sometime prior to 1961, but in 61 he was, of course, took this pastorship in Southern Pines. So anyway, okay, bring it back to me if you would, Lee. That's all I really got on Albert Bell, and like I said, I wasn't so much interested in him as I was trying to find out something about May Bell's family, particularly her mother and father. And I thought if I could ever find a wedding announcement, for example, it would list her mother and father. And so that's what kind of got me on the trail. When you're doing this type of research, you've heard me mention this newspapers.com website on every show, and I use it every show in preparation for each show. And it's a great tool. There's a ton of information there. I forgot the exact number, but there are well over 100,000 newspapers around the world that are represented in this one website. So you can go in and you can set a bunch of parameters to search. You can search by names, by topic. You can search by date, certainly. You can search by city, state, country. And so when I was trying to find who May Bell's mother and father were, I would sometimes search for May Wood, sometimes search for May Woods Bell. Quite often, I found her listed as Mrs. A.D. Bell. Interestingly enough, that was a common method for referencing married women for many years, all over, not just here in North Carolina. I saw the same thing done in newspapers all over the country. A woman would be referenced by her husband's initials and his last name. So in many cases, you never knew the woman's first or middle name because she was always addressed by Mrs. So-and-so and so-and-so. So as I said, I kept looking for May Woods Bell, and Mrs. A.D. Bell, and I found more reference to him when I would search for Mrs. A.D. Bell than I would find for her. And so that's what kind of got me off on that tangent. Okay, it's time for our next commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Twin County Hall of Fame. A lot of information here, a lot of good people have been nominated and entered into the Twin County Hall of Fame. So when we come back, we'll talk about some of those. We'll show you some pictures. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be back with more Way Back Wednesday in just a moment.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitation and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
When faced with special care needs for elderly or disabled loved ones, families want compassionate, comforting care. That's Tender Touch Home Care Services' goal, providing the level of care we would expect for our own. With over 10 years of home care excellence, Tender Touch provides an array of services that keeps your loved one at home. From personal care, light housekeeping, errands, and meal preparation, to our private duty care program, which combines all of our home care offerings in one package.
Tender Touch Home Care Services, where your needs are our concern.
Okay, we're back. I was on the phone with a caller during the break there. I apologize. I was just telling the caller, I'm very much interested in May Woods Bell's ancestry in England. I've not anywhere seen what her full maiden name was. So I don't know if May was her first name and she had a middle name and then it was Woods, or if May was she had a first name and May was her middle name and her last name was Woods. As I said earlier, I've looked at this from several different angles, and yes, I wish I had asked her while I was visiting with her in the nursing home what her parents' names were. As I said, she was really weak. We were only there for a few minutes, I should say, maybe 10, 15 at the most. And so there was 1,000 questions running through my mind that I wanted to get answers to, but at the same time, I didn't want to overburden her. As I said, she was asleep when I got there. I actually woke her up when I got to her room. And but I will go back and I'll see her again. I want to visit with her again. And I'll try to have a list of questions so when I get there, I can ask the most pertinent questions and get the best answers. But on a future show, and it may be next week, I'm not making any promises, but on a future show, we will definitely know more about May Woods Bell and her English ancestry. Okay. All right, I mentioned earlier that there's the Twin County Hall of Fame and Museum here in Rocky Mount has done a great job over the years of inducting prominent citizens and people who have made notable contributions to not only Rocky Mount and not only to Nash and Edgecombe County, but to Eastern North Carolina and indeed to the state of North Carolina. And so when I was looking at the Twin County Hall of Fame, specifically for May Woods Bell, I certainly found a lot of information about other prominent Rocky Mount citizens. And so I decided, rather than just kind of pick and choose, I was just going to take what was already there. And the first page is an introduction. And when you go to by the way, you can go to Twin County Hall of Fame website by going to Twin County Hall of Fame. It's abbreviated, TCHOF.org. TwinCountyHallOfFame.org is what it stands for. But you can go there, and there's several categories of how these inductees are brought into the organization. And so they're based on a wide variety of different things. But in any case, there's a reference there to the 2021 inductees. And so I said, well, okay, we'll just start there tonight. And I think there was about a dozen, as I recall, eight or 10 anyway. So without further ado, let's get into these. Lee, put up item number 9 if you would. As I said, some of these folks I knew and still know for that matter. Others I never heard of. So this gentleman on your screen here now is Mr. A.P. Cobb. And everyone I'm going to talk about here in the next few minutes was inducted into the Twin County Hall of Fame during the 2021 induction session. Mr. A.P. Cobb, Alton Parks Cobb Sr. was his full name. Was born in 1912, died in 1984. Was a successful agronomist, businessman, and inspiration. He was a charter member of Region L Council of Governments and advised local and statewide farmers throughout his career. When he was forced to retire after permanently losing his sight, he turned his attention to serving Brattleboro as its mayor for 15 years. And you know, my family on my father's side is from Brattleboro in that area, and so I felt like I should know this gentleman, but honestly, I did not. I never knew him. I think I probably know some of his relatives, and I will make some inquiries starting tomorrow, in fact, to see if indeed some of the Cobbs that I know are related to this gentleman. But he was the first inductee in the 2021 Hall of Fame. Okay, Lee, let's go to item number 10, if you would. This gentleman here is certainly one I obviously never met. He was J.O.W. Gravely. His name was John Oglesby Winston, nicknamed Captain Jack Gravely. And I've heard this name pronounced Gravely over all my life, but I've also heard it pronounced Gravely. I'm not sure which is correct, but I do know that I personally knew a Gravely family member who pronounced his last name Gravely, so I'm going to go with that. It looks like Gravely, I know, but in any case, Gravely was the person I knew, and that's why he said it when he introduced himself. This Mr. Captain Jack Gravely was born in 1862 and died in 1932. Originally from Henry County, Virginia, was instrumental in establishing Rocky Mount as a major tobacco market and was founder of the China American Tobacco Company in 1918, which grew into one of the largest, most productive independent concerns in the industry. So certainly the Gravely family name has been associated with tobacco in Rocky Mount and in eastern North Carolina ever since I was a small child, and indeed going back to the 1800s. So Captain Jack Gravely certainly earned his rightful place in the Twin County Hall of Fame. Item number 11, if you would, Lee. This gentleman I did know. He's still alive, by the way. This is Reggie Henderson. Some of you may remember Reggie Henderson. Coached, I had him as a coach when I was I didn't play competitive sports, but when I was at R.M. Wilson, he would sometimes substitute for the gym teachers or whatever, and so I met him there, of course. But Reggie Henderson, though living in Wilson, has dedicated over 40 years of service to Rocky Mount as an elite high school basketball coach, teacher, truant officer, and molder of character. He coached Rocky Mount High School Griffons to a state 4A championship in '78 and in '82, and was a runner-up in 1981. Two of his players, Phil Ford and Buck Williams, turned pro, while many others went on to play collegiately. So Reggie Henderson certainly was instrumental in developing a lot of young men in basketball and other sports as well. But certainly Phil Ford and Buck Williams are two prominent names that got better at their game under the tutelage of Reggie Henderson, no doubt. Okay, Lee, let's go to item number 12 if we could. This lady I did not know, I can't say I've ever met. This is Dr. Glenda L. Knight, Glenda Lawrence Knight. Combined her doctorate of psychology with the love of helping others to hold executive positions with Head Start, the Boys and Girls Club, and the town of Princeville, where she is currently the town manager. She had success in revitalizing the recovery efforts in Princeville after Hurricane Matthew in 2016 and was commended by the Edgecombe County Board of Commissioners for her role in the town's progress. So kudos there to Dr. Knight, mayor of Princeville. And as I said, I've never met this lady. She is obviously still with us too, but just another of the 2021 inductees into the Twin County Hall of Fame. Okay, Lee, if we could then, let's go to item number 13. This lady is Miss Delia W. Perkins, Delia Wood Perkins. She enjoyed a 28-year career with Edgecombe County Public Schools and also served 2 terms as mayor for the town of Princeville. How about that? 2 Princeville mayors here inducted at the same session. She was a member of the Edgecombe County Health Board, National Council of Black Mayors, North Carolina League of Municipalities, and North Carolina Association of Teacher Assistants. So congratulations to Miss Delia Wood Perkins for her induction into the Hall of Fame. Okay, Lee, let's go to item number 14 if we could. This gentleman is Mr. Charles A. Robinson, Charles Austin Robinson, born in 1919. He died in 1995. He was the owner, operator, chairman, and president of Carolina Office Equipment, otherwise known as COECO, for over 53 years. He received the Governor Award for Order of the Longleaf Pine, Distinguished Citizen Award, served on the Board of Directors of the People's Bank and Trust, and as the president of the Rocky Mountain Merchants Association. Robbins was one of the original founders of Lakeside Baptist Church and was a proud Eagle Scout and Scoutmaster. I never knew Mr. Robbins, but when I was reading this little overview of his accomplishments and so forth in around the community, I recall hearing his name several times over the years. So I never knew him personally, but I do recall hearing about the gentleman several times. Okay, Lee, if we could, let's go to item number 15 then. This gentleman here needs no introduction to any sports fans in Rocky Mountain. This is Don Coal Bucket Stallings. He was inducted last year into the 2021 Twin County Hall of Fame. It says Don is a Rocky Mountain native through and through, but is a citizen of the nation. He played football at Rocky Mountain Senior High and at UNC Chapel Hill, and then a year professionally with the Washington Redskins, after which he came home to run the family business for his ill father. He formed Eagle Transport Corporation in 1968 and grew it to be the 2nd largest petroleum carrier in the United States. How about that? He is a generous supporter of many organizations, particularly North Carolina Wesleyan College and UNC Chapel Hill, with its Stallings Evans Sports Medicine Complex. I know Don personally. I've been to his home, done some work for him in the past. I see him at breakfast occasionally. He'll sometimes eat down at Smith's restaurant over by Smith's Red and White. I hadn't seen him recently, but sometimes he's in there. Great guy, been a great leader for Rocky Mountain in so many ways. But again, well-deserved inductee to the Twin County Hall of Fame. Okay, Lee, let's go to item number 16. Speaking of well-deserved and someone who has certainly been instrumental in helping Rocky Mountain grow recently is Gus Tullis. This is Gus Harrison. I never knew Gus's middle name was Harrison. Gus Harrison Tullis, local businessman and civic leader, exemplifies the good citizen who has fought at the local and state levels for the common good, whether as president of the North Carolina State JCs, member of the UNC Board of Governors, the Salvation Army Advisory Board, the North Carolina Department of Transportation, or the North Carolina Port Authority. His integrity and commitment is reflected in the many honors bestowed on him over the years, from being named in 1974 of one of the 5 outstanding men in North Carolina, to the Sunset Avenue overpass being named Gus H. Tullis Bridge in 2021. I know Gus too. I've done some work for Gus. Super nice guy, and very much deserving of this award. So congratulations, Gus, on your appointment into the Twin County Hall of Fame as well. Okay, Lee, let's go to item number 17 if we could. I never knew this gentleman. This was Dr. Joseph W. Parker Jr. Dr. Joseph Willis Parker Jr. was born in 1916. He died in 1960. He was a general practice doctor, community advocate, and member of the Rocky Mountain Board of Education. He believed education was the key to success and making life better. J.W. Parker Middle School in Rocky Mount was named in his honor. I did not know that until I read this getting prepared for tonight's show, that this was the man that J.W. Parker was named after. And I went to school there for 1 year anyway, 7th grade. So congratulations, Mr. Parker. Okay, those were the nominees and inductees, I should say, not nominees, but inductees into the 2021 Twin County Hall of Fame. And just to kind of wrap things up tonight, I was trying to find some pictures, getting back to Maywood Bell and the Children's Museum and Sunset Park. And I was looking in earnestly, trying to find a few pictures that would bring back some memories. And I found 3 that I had not seen before. So Lee, if you would, item number 18. This appeared in the Rocky Mountain Telegram in October of 1965. And this is Mrs. Marguerite McGee, a staff member who gives the final touches to the latest Children's Museum acquisition, a 9-foot, 9-inch Pacific sailfish presented by local businessman G.A. Wilkinson. Wilkinson caught this spectacular fish off Acapulco, Mexico. We are very happy to accept this fine specimen. It will closely demonstrate the differences between the Atlantic sailfish, the blue marlin, and the larger Pacific relative. We have had the smaller fish for several years now, said the director, Mrs. May Bell. So I went in this museum a bunch of times when I was little, and I honestly cannot remember this fish. I'm sure I walked past it, under it, looked at it, I'm sure, but do not remember. Okay, Lee, item number 19. We're about to run out of time here. Number 19, this is kind of a blurry picture, but this was when the JCs acquired the train at Sunset Park, and I believe this was 1952. Spent a many happy hour riding this train, as did many of you, I'm sure. It brought a lot of joy to a lot of kids over the years. A lot of, not only kids, I should say, a lot of adults too had fun riding this train. And some of my fondest memories with my kids are riding with them while sitting in this train. And lastly, Lee, item number 20 from 1957. This is a terrible picture, I know, but it's the only picture I've been able to find that shows, if you can zoom out, Lee, because it automatically zoomed in when you brought it up on the screen, I should say. It says, here's an exterior view of the Rocky Mountain Children's Museum, which attracts many thousands each year to Sunset Park. With strong support from the Junior Guild, this new home of the museum was completed in 1954. I neglected to say earlier when I was talking about my visit to May Bell Sunday, I asked her specifically about the dinosaur skeleton. And before I could say anything else, she basically told me in no uncertain terms that was Harold Menzies' project, and she stopped short of saying Harold dropped the ball. So I'm not going to say Harold dropped the ball, but she did say she don't know what happened, but Harold was the one that was supposed to get that skeleton together, get it put together, and it didn't happen. And so we'll let that lay right there. All right, Lee, bring it back to me. Folks, that's going to do it for us tonight. I thank you so much to those that called in and shared your memories and your thoughts about May Woods Bell. She is at Spring Arbor Retirement Center over on Winston Avenue. Before you get to Inglewood Baptist Church, which is on the right, this is on your left. She'd love to have a visitor too, I'm sure. Take care of yourselves, folks. Have a great week. Be kind to one another. We'll see you next week with more Way Back Wednesday. Good night.